I never imagined the simple tray of cookies could spark the moment my life began to crack. Yet there I was, stepping out of my kitchen with a batch of warm oatmeal cinnamon cookies, only to be met with a voice sharp enough to slice through bone. "Don't come near me with that. You look completely humiliating." Harper didn't shout, she stabbed the air with each word. She stood in my hallway with one hand on her hip and the other clutching her phone. Her expression twisted as if the sight of me apron, slippers, and all was something foul. Beside her, her friend let out a snorting laugh that bounced off the walls of the house I had lived in peacefully for 30 years. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen, tray trembling in my hands. I'd baked those cookies the way I always had back when Lucas came home from school tired and hungry, back when a warm kitchen meant comfort. Somehow, I still carried the habit, foolishly believing warmth could soften any moment. But nothing felt soft anymore. Harper leaned closer, her eyes cold and polished. "If you show up at my bridal shower looking like this, I swear I'll never live it down." Her friend muffled another giggle. I felt my throat tighten, not from fear, but from disbelief. No one, not a neighbor, not a stranger, not even an angry teenager I once fostered, had ever spoken to me that way. The hostility in her tone was too deliberate, too practiced. And Lucas, my son, stood right behind her, silent, staring at the floor. He didn't defend me. He didn't even look at me. That silence burned hotter than anything Harper said. "Honestly, Sarah," she continued, using my name like I was some old acquaintance instead of the woman who opened her home to her future husband. "Do you even look in a mirror before stepping outside your room? People will think Lucas dragged someone from a charity drive into his wedding photos." Her friend wheezed with laughter. My hands tightened around the tray until it nearly slipped. I set it down before my shaking became too obvious. Harper's eyes flicked to the cookies and she smirked. "You weren't planning to bring those to the shower, were you?" God, that's tragic. I felt something shift inside me, not anger. Not yet, but the faintest flicker of a woman who had survived much worse than snide remarks and polished cruelty. A woman who had raised 6 foster children through nightmares and courtrooms. A woman who had worked herself raw so her son could grow up stable and safe. Harper didn't know that woman, but she would. And as Harper's laughter faded into the hallway, I didn't realize yet, this was only the first crack. The real break was coming. And it would come from the one person I never expected. My own son. Cruelty rarely arrives in a single blow. It comes in thin layers, comments, glances, dismissals so quiet at first that you wonder if you imagine the sting. Harper's hostility was no different. It wasn't born that morning in my hallway. It had been growing for months, spreading like frost across windows I once believed were secure. It began with the whispers. Harper never confronted me directly in the early days. Instead, she murmured things just loud enough for me to hear through thin walls or over the clatter of dishes. She raised foster kids. You know what kind of people do that. I don't want Lucas dragged down by her. Baggage. Imagine bringing that to Sloan family events. Her mother, Vivian, always nodded approvingly, wearing the crisp, polite smile of someone who would whisper gossip during prayer. And I, too naive, too hopeful, kept trying to win them over with kindness. I didn't realize then that some people see compassion as a weakness rather than a bridge. Harper's judgment seeped into every corner of my life. My house was quaint in the same way. Someone calls a stray dog sweet. My car a 12-year-old. Toyota I bought after 3 years of juggling double shifts was labeled embarrassing. My mismatched furniture, collected through years of raising children who came to me frightened and fragile, became clutter. But the worst wound wasn't about my home, my clothes, or my car. It was about my heart. You see, I had asked Harper only one question the first time she visited. Do you love Lucas for who he is or what he will become? I meant it the way any mother would, as a quiet safeguard, a simple truth-seeking moment. But to Harper it was a threat, a spotlight shining through the cracks of her carefully constructed persona. From that moment on, she treated me as an obstacle she needed to remove. Slowly, I watched Lucas drift away from me, as if pulled by an invisible tide. He stopped swinging by after work. Messages grew shorter. Calls ended with Harper's voice urging him to hurry. When he did visit, he seemed distracted, restless, like he was afraid of staying too long. "Mom," he once said, avoiding my gaze, "Harper thinks, well, she says I'm too attached, that it makes me look immature." Those words didn't sound like him. They sounded rehearsed, borrowed, paid for. And each time Harper hosted an engagement event, a brunch, a tasting, a rehearsal dinner, I saw photos online before I ever heard about them. Smiling faces, toasting glasses, Lucas standing beside her family, their arms looped around him like they owned him. "Where is Lucas's mother?" Someone commented under one of the pictures. Harper answered, "She couldn't make it." But the truth was, I had never been invited. And just when I thought her quiet erasure was the worst she could do, Harper arrived at my door one afternoon with her mother in tow, and delivered a humiliation that would change everything. They came without calling, first Harper and her mother marching up my steps with the sharp, hurried rhythm of women who believed the world should pause when they arrived. When I opened the door, their perfume reached me before their words did, sweet, heavy, suffocating. Vivian gave a thin, practiced smile, the kind issued at charity galas and photo ops, not kitchens like mine. Harper didn't bother with politeness at all. "We need to see what you plan on wearing to my bridal shower," she declared, sweeping past me as though my home was a hallway leading to a dressing room. For a moment, I simply stood there, stunned. They weren't asking, they were inspecting, evaluating, preparing to judge. Still, I went to my closet. My hands weren't trembling from fear, it was disappointment. I chose 3 dresses that held meaning for me. A soft blue dress I'd worn the night I accepted a foster care award. A simple cream dress I'd sewn myself during a winter when money was tight, but hope wasn't. A floral dress Lucas had once said made me look gentle like spring. I carried them out and laid them across the couch. Harper took one look and let out a sharp, amused breath. Not quite a laugh, more like indulgent disgust. "You're kidding," she said, lifting the floral dress between 2 fingers. "This looks like it came from a rummage sale. Are you trying to ruin my theme?" Vivian stepped in with that polished cruelty she hid behind soft tones. "We're aiming for elegance, dear. Something sophisticated." The unsaid words hovered between us. "And you aren't." I steadied myself on the back of a chair. "I can find something else," I whispered. Harper didn't even look at me. "No, you shouldn't. In fact, you shouldn't come at all." The sentence sliced cleanly, like she'd rehearsed it. "You'll make everything awkward," she added, crossing her arms. "You always do. And people talk, you know. They wonder why Lucas is marrying into such humble roots." Her mother's expression didn't falter, but her silence agreed with every word. I tried to speak, but she cut me off. "Honestly, Sarah, the best gift you could give us is staying out of sight." And then footsteps. Familiar ones. Lucas entered the room. Relief sparked in me for a moment. Surely he'd tell them to stop. This was his mother they were tearing down in her own home. But when he looked at me, something was missing: warmth, certainty. The boy I raised. His face was stiff, guarded. "Lucas," I breathed. "Please say something." He did, but not what I expected. "You're not my real mother," he said. The world around me froze. And as the weight of those words sank into me, I realized the betrayal had only just begun. Someone else would soon enter my life with truth sharp enough to unravel everything Harper built. For 3 days after Lucas walked out of my house with Harper and her mother, silence settled over every room like dust. I moved through the motions making tea, tidying the counter, watering the plants, while replaying his words again and again, trying to understand how love could be rewritten so easily in someone's mind. On the 3rd morning, a knock came at my door. 3 soft taps, gentle, familiar. Albert Hayes. My next-door neighbor for nearly 20 years. A quiet man with kind eyes and hands that trembled slightly from age. He was holding a small paper bag of muffins. "You look like someone's stolen the color out of you," he said as soon as I opened the door. I tried to smile. "It's been a long week." My heart tightened. "About what?" "About Harper," he said. I froze. Albert reached into his coat and pulled out a thin folder, edges worn from being handled too many times. "Do you remember the charity project Harper worked on last year? The one raising money for foster kids?" "She never visited a single child," Albert said quietly. "Not once. And worse, she redirected the donation funds." I blinked, unsure I heard him correctly. "She? Stole the money?" He nodded, eyes filled with sorrow. Several $1,000s. Designer stores, spa packages, meals at upscale restaurants. All paid for with the charity's card. My stomach dropped. He slid the folder toward me. I kept records, emails, receipts, screenshots. I was the volunteer treasurer. I saw everything. With trembling fingers, I opened the folder. Emails where Harper complained that the charity budget limited her lifestyle. Messages instructing volunteers to falsify receipts. Bank statements showing purchases that had nothing to do with children. A photo grainy, but unmistakable, of Harper leaving a boutique with armfuls of bags. Charity cards still in hand. A slow, cold clarity settled in my chest. "Why now?" I whispered. Albert looked at me with the softness of someone who had loved goodness long enough to defend it. "Because yesterday I overheard Harper telling someone she planned to cut you out of Lucas's life completely. She said you were dragging them down." For a moment the room spun. Not from shock, but from revelation. This wasn't just cruelty. This was strategy. Albert rested his hand on mine. "You deserve support, Sarah. And there's someone else who needs to hear this truth. Someone who owes you her loyalty." My eyes lifted. "Who?" "Miriam Douglas," he said. "One of your former foster children. She's a journalist now. And she'll fight for you." And when Miriam opened that folder, the first spark of a storm began, one that would expose everything Harper tried to bury. The morning of Harper's bridal shower arrived quiet and pale, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. I wasn't planning to attend. Harper had made that painfully clear, but I knew something irreversible was already in motion. Ever since Miriam took the folder from my hands with a promise sharpened by conviction, the air around me felt charged, waiting for the moment truth would surface. Around 9 o'clock, my phone lit up with a single message from Miriam. "It's out." Below the text was a link. I opened it. The headline struck like a hammer. "Bridal influencer accused of diverting charity funds intended for foster children." There were no vague statements or half-hearted hints. Miriam had laid everything bare. Verified messages, time-stamped receipts, anonymous testimonies, a chronological trail showing exactly where the money had gone and who had benefited. And the town reacted instantly. Within minutes, comments flooded social media. "Disgusting. How do you steal from children? I always knew something was off about her. Hope she faces charges." Merchants unfollowed her. Sponsors announced distancing statements. A cafe she once promoted publicly condemned her actions. Even the charity's donor list temporarily froze. Then the police issued a confirmation. They were officially reviewing the financial records. This wasn't gossip anymore. This was an avalanche. Around 9:30, Albert called. "Turn on Channel 7, he urged. I did. A reporter stood outside the Sloan family home while police cruisers lined the street. Neighbors gathered behind the caution tape, whispering, pointing, filming. For the first time, the Sloan estate, always pristine in its image, looked fragile. This investigation is ongoing, the reporter said. But early indications point to significant misappropriation. I felt no satisfaction, only relief. Relief that truth had finally been given a voice. And while the world absorbed the news, Harper arrived at her bridal shower venue. Except, nothing was there. No flowers. No caterers. No music. No guests. The venue had locked its doors. Every vendor had withdrawn after the article hit. The parking lot stood empty as Harper circled the building in frantic disbelief. Her panic erupted into a scream when she saw me standing by Albert's car. "You ruined everything," she cried, pointing at me, shaking. "You did this." I met her gaze, steady as stone. "No, Harper," I said softly. The truth did. Before she could fire back, a silver car pulled in Vivian. Then an SUV, Harper's father. One by one, relatives arrived, each with a phone in hand, each already aware of the scandal. And then Lucas arrived. Harper rushed toward him, desperate. But he didn't look at her. He looked at me. And for the first time since she'd twisted him away from me, his eyes were full of breaking. "Mom," he whispered, "I'm so sorry. But apologies are only the beginning, and sometimes the storm that destroys one life becomes the wind that rebuilds another." The parking lot felt strangely quiet after Lucas's voice broke open, as if even the wind paused to listen. He stood in front of me, shoulders trembling, breath unsteady, eyes filled with the kind of regret that ages a person in seconds. "I let her twist everything," he whispered. "I let her tell me who you were. I don't know how I became someone who could talk to you like that." He sank to his knees right there on the cold asphalt, as if the weight of his own words demanded it. The boy I'd raised, the man he'd become, all folded into one broken shape at my feet. I touched his shoulder gently. "Lucas," I said softly, "look at me." When he lifted his eyes, they were red and raw. Not from the scandal, not from the embarrassment, but from the sudden clarity of realizing how deeply he had been manipulated. "You hurt me," I said, not in anger but in truth. "Not because of what you said, but because you let someone else speak in your place." His face crumpled at that. He nodded, unable to form words. Behind him, Harper stared in horror, watching the man she'd shaped slip out of her grasp. Vivian looked away, her jaw clenched tight, and Harper's father stood rigid beside his car. Disappointment carved into the lines of his face. For the first time, Harper's carefully constructed world wasn't just cracking, it was collapsing. "You can't just run to her," Harper shrieked suddenly, voice lifting with frantic desperation. "Lucas, she's manipulating you. Don't you see? That story is exaggerated." "Enough," he said quietly, without even turning to look at her. The single word struck harder than a shout. Harper recoiled, stunned. Lucas rose slowly, brushing his hands against his legs. He looked at Harper with a sorrow that made her flinch. "I defended you against everyone," he said. "Against my friends, my co-workers, my mother. I trusted you more than anyone." His voice trembled. "But you lied, you stole, and you tried to take me away from the only parent who ever loved me without condition." Harper's mouth opened, but no sound came out. For once, she had no script. And the worst part, Lucas continued. I let you. He turned from her. She reached for his arm, but he stepped back. Don't, he said quietly. It's over. Harper looked around the empty parking lot, the locked venue, the relatives staring, the mother who had withdrawn her support, the father ashamed to stand beside her. Her perfect life had finally met reality, and reality wasn't kind. Lucas walked to my side, slipping an arm around me, tentative, fragile, but real. Mom, please let me fix this. There were no cameras, no applause, just a broken man asking for a way home. I nodded gently. Healing takes time, I whispered. But you're here. That's a start. Behind us, Harper's sobs echoed through the emptiness. But the story didn't end in that parking lot because the town had only begun to unravel the truth. And soon, the consequences would reach far beyond Harper herself. In the weeks that followed that chaotic morning, the shockwaves rolling through town didn't soften, they intensified. News cycles churned, interviews surfaced, and more people came forward with stories of Harper's polished deceit. The Sloan family withdrew from public view, their once renowned social circles suddenly distant and cold. But while their world contracted, mine began to open again. Lucas visited almost daily. Sometimes he came with groceries. Sometimes with clumsy apologies he rewrote 3 times. Other times he just sat quietly at my kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug he never finished, eyes filled with a remorse that didn't need words. One evening he looked up and asked, "Do you think I can be better than the person I became?" I touched his cheek, the way I used to when he was small. "You already are. You just forgot who you were for a while. Forgiveness isn't magic. It doesn't erase. But it heals slowly, honestly." And we walked through that process together. Meanwhile, the charity investigation concluded. Harper wasn't just criticized, she was held accountable. Restitution was ordered, community service assigned, and her social presence dissolved into echoes of what used to be curated perfection. Her mother, Vivian, faced her own reckoning. The women's league she once presided over voted unanimously to remove her. Invitations shriveled. Events she once dominated forgot her name. In the end, she remained alone with the reputation she'd protected more fiercely than her child. Harper left town quietly, with no send-off and no fiancé at her side. And in the quiet after the storm, something unexpected happened. The State Foster Care Coalition invited me to their annual ceremony. I didn't know why at first. I assumed it was a small recognition, maybe a plaque or a thank you. But when I walked into the auditorium, the sight took my breath. Rows of faces turned toward me, familiar, beloved. Adults now, but once frightened children who had crossed my threshold, with nothing but a trash bag of belongings and hope too fragile to name. When they stepped onto the stage one by one, my heart throbbed in a way I hadn't felt in years. You were the first person who made me feel safe. You taught me how to trust. You gave me a home when no one else wanted a broken kid. You saved my life. Their words weren't loud, they were steady. True. A kind of truth that doesn't need headlines. Then Miriam, now a respected journalist, took the podium. She spoke of justice, but also of love, the quiet, unadvertised kind. Some people build empires out of image, she said, but some build lives out of compassion. Tonight, we honor someone who never needed applause to change the world. They handed me an award, but it wasn't the trophy that mattered. It was the hands that wrapped around mine, the faces that smiled at me, the proof that every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every tear shed in the dark had grown into something strong. After the ceremony, as we stood outside beneath warm lantern light, Lucas slipped his arm through mine. "I hope," he whispered, voice thick with emotion, "that the rest of my life makes you proud." I squeezed his hand. "You already have." Because the truth was simple. Some people spend their lives polishing broken mirrors, but some quiet, ordinary people spend theirs mending hearts. And love, once rooted, never collapses.